Hello everybody, my name is Adam Thorne and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. I will welcome my co-hosts. Firstly, Chris Fenton. Chris,
hello,
welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And Jake, welcome to the show.
Hello, Adam.
Now, this is the second episode where we've been releasing these as videos.
It is.
And I've had a look back at the first one that went up, and I noticed I was slumping a lot. So now I'm keeping.
We were
my
being
back
comfortable in the studio.
So I'm leaning back now. Practicing being a sort of TV presenter now. We've also, because we were sort of sprung out at the last minute, we weren't really prepared.
No, we weren't.
Now we are prepared. For those of you that are watching the video here, we've got model aircraft. These are all Chris's. He collects them. Chris, talk us a little bit. If you listen to the audio, this would be of no use to you. But for our
we can describe each of them in detail.
Yes, we can do.
Yeah.
So, if Chris, talk me through what we've got here.
So, look, one of my hobbies is collecting scale model aircraft. So, I usually collect the 1/200 scale or larger. In the studio today, we've got a former Virgin Australia 777. We've got a Virgin Australia E-Jet. We've got an Air New Zealand Dreamliner. Blast from the past, East-West, British Aerospace. We've got the Alliance 100 Years of Air Force Centenary E-Jet. And we've got a Qantas 737 set up as well in the studio.
They are brilliant because they've actually got a lot of them have got the regos on them as well. And they are 2-scale models.
Yep.
They look really, really impressive. How long have you been collecting these? How many have you got? Tell us a bit more about this.
Look, I've got... probably over 400 models.
400?
Yeah,
That's a lot.
It's a quirky little hobby.
Yeah.
Look, I've been collecting models or model aircraft for over 20 years. It kind of begun with collecting models of aircraft or airlines that I'd flown on. Then it kind of grew into collecting aircraft or models of aircraft and airlines with unique and quirky liveries. And then it just kind of grew from there. So, yeah.
Well, now you are a celebrity. You shouldn't be paying for these things. You should be sent them, surely now.
Yeah, look, I'm open to bribes.
Yeah, if you are a major airline and you want to send Chris one of your models, absolutely do. You can find the address for Momentum Media, which is the company that owns Australian Aviation, on our website. So send them to Chris Fenton on the address, and you would love to receive it. Is there any particular gaps in your collection that you would like to be filled?
Oh, look, there's a couple of gaps from some of the Middle Eastern airlines. I'm missing a Turkish Airlines. There's a really cool Turkish Airlines model that I'm trying to get my hands on. But yeah, look, I'm open to offers and bribes, and any that are sent in, we'll happily display them here in the studio for when we record the podcast.
I don't know why you like these things so much. They're woefully inaccurate. I mean, they're too small. Like, nobody's going to be able to fit in those.
They're to scale, Jake.
They need to be at least twice as big.
Right, before you two have a round, moving on. Now, I'm going to start off the show. We have had an email, because you'd imagine nobody listens to this podcast, but apparently lots of people do.
We do have listeners.
We're weirdly popular. Yes. And we have had an email from a significant person in the industry. And it's a very, very, very nice email, I should say, from Christian Bennett, who is the Chief Corporate Affairs and Sustainability Officer at Virgin Australia. Firstly, thank you very much for getting in touch, Christian. I'm going to read out I hope he doesn't mind, I'm going to read out the email. And he says, hi, Adam, Chris and Jake. Enjoy your podcast very much. Just regarding your 22nd of June podcast edition, I just wanted to flag that our new and first 737's MAX, his name has a certain way to pronounce it. So the Mia in Monkey Mia is actually pronounced Maya, as in the department store, not Mia, as in Mia Farrow, and as pronounced on the show at the 34-minute mark. And I suspect by most folks outside WA, where the body of water that is Monkey Maya is actually located. A minor detail, but just thought you would like to know, and your WA listeners will appreciate it. Now, I must say, I get a lot of angry emails, but that is a lovely email.
That's lovely.
That is a very,
and
very
refreshing.
nice email. And we are here at Australian Aviation sticklers for accuracy. We try our very best.
We do, no matter what some of the people on Facebook might say.
Exactly.
But no, that was, I believe that was me who said that. So Maya culpa from me there. And my sincerest apologies to all of our listeners in WA. All lovely people, both of them. So.
Thank you for a very, very lovely email,
thanks, Christian.
And obviously, Christian, if you are a fan of a show, we would love to have you on the show.
Absolutely.
We'll say it now. You want to come on the show, we'd love to have you as a guest. Or if your boss, Jane, would like to come on as a guest, we'd also love to have her on the show as well. So he passed that message on. But no, thank you very much for that, guy.
I hear whispers in the studio that they're bringing some more furniture into the studio so we can actually have guests sitting on the couch with us talking.
This is expanding at rapid pace, isn't it? Yeah, well, come on in there.
Come on in,
we'll
sit on the couch. We'll bring you a cup of tea.
I hear whispers in the studio as well, but I think that is the Momentum Media poltergeist, so it can probably be ignored. Yeah. Speaking of Monkey Maya, by the way, as of this week, Virgin has it now. They've taken delivery of Monkey Maya VH-8IA, the first 737 MAX 8, and at the time this podcast goes out. At the time of recording, it's not in Australia yet, but at the time this podcast goes out, it should be in Australia or at least very, very close to Australia. So congratulations to Virgin for finally getting VH-8IA Monkey Maya, their first 737 MAX 8, the first of 8. And that's going to be pressed into service on the Cairns to Haneda route as soon as possible.
Welcome to the family.
Welcome to the family. Now we will crack on to the main body of the show. And it's been a kind of a fairly busy news week. As we record this on the Tuesday, the kind of big story is Western Sydney International has actually released some detailed information of what the flight paths are going to be. And again, we've said this before on the show, we dislike the term noise, because noise has connotations that it's a bad thing. We prefer the beautiful purring of an aircraft. And I would prefer to enjoy that music
absolutely
as often as I can, but some misinformed people dislike it, so bit of a hoo-ha there. Jake, you reported on this morning. What do we know about this?
Yeah, so they've released the preliminary flight past Western Sydney. There's also this online tool that will help residents see the impact. The purring from the sky kittens, as Adam calls them, on their particular locations. So this flight paths do include reciprocal runway operations, or RRO. That's a bit of a mouthful. Basically, at night, when traffic permits, in order to minimize the purring, planes will be arriving and departing from the same direction. So during the day, the NRA aircraft will use runway 05, approaching from the southwest and departing to the northeast, or runway 23, approaching from the northeast, departing to the southwest, depending on the prevailing winds. At night, when the weather conditions are suitable and there is lower traffic demand, the airport will have the option of RRO, in which all aircraft will approach from and depart to the southwest, which will supposedly minimize the impact of sky kitten purring on more densely populated areas of Western Sydney.
Worded sky kitten purring.
Sky kitten
I like
purring,
that one.
yeah.
Well done.
I would say is that they've obviously been very, very careful in how they've handled this. So again, we talked about the issues with inverted comma noise at Brisbane Airport with its new runway, but their kind of online tool, I think it came out either when the runway opened or slightly before. Whereas obviously Western Sydney, firstly they broadly announced what the fly pass would be a long, long time ago. But even this online tool now is coming up years before it opens.
Yep.
So I think they have kind of bent over backwards here to appease people.
Yeah, look, absolutely they have, and well done to WSI for doing that. I'm of an age where, as our listeners and you guys here in the studio know, I grew up in Leichhardt. I grew up under the flight paths. Like, we could almost touch them as they flew over. And then for lack of a better choice of words, and listeners, don't shoot the messenger, the yuppies moved into the inner west and started complaining about aircraft noise.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, number one, the airport's been here for years and years and years. You've just moved into the area, and you've moved into the area not looking above you, knowing that you're living under a flight path.
No sympathy here.
Bugger back off out of the area, if you ask me. So I was around and a young lad when the No Aircraft Noise Party was a massive movement in Australia years ago. So kudos to Western Sydney Airport for, before the airport's even opened, they've announced their runway plans. They've announced their noise impact zones.
Purring impact zones.
Purring zone. They've put a brilliant online tool out for households that will be affected by the sky purring. I'm pretty sure.
I don't like the word affected either. We really need to watch our language.
Households that will be treated to the purring of the sky kittens, which will, according to this article in The Guardian, be louder than a washing machine or vacuum cleaner more than 100 times a day.
Washing machine.
But these are very loud sky kittens.
Yes,
look, they are, but for those impacted, affected, whatever we're going to call it, treated to the purr, they will get their windows double glazed and have stuff to impact the noise or the purring that is soon to come. Let's face it, even though Western Sydney Airport will have the capacity to, double what Sydney Airport can currently hold, they're not talking, that many flights a day as operations start. Gradually, flights will ramp up, don't get me wrong, as Western Sydney Airport becomes bigger. But I don't think the impact will be that big. At the moment, it seems the most affected suburb, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jake, was Mount Druitt.
It was noted that suburbs sitting south of Mount Druitt could be among the areas most affected by purring from the new airport. That's per The Guardian. So apparently the modelling will show that the suburbs will fall in a narrow stretch of land that, and this is again from The Guardian, by 2033 it will have multiple instances per day of sky kitten purring, either of or in excess of 70 decibels outdoors, 60 decibels indoors, which is loud enough to affect normal conversation.
Oh, look, I live close to a main road, and some of these tools that drive down with mufflers that need to be silenced immediately, or the emergency vehicles that don't understand they don't need their siren going when the lights are green and traffic is flowing, yet they still put it on. I put up with it because it's live. Get on with it.
Exactly. Like, there's genuinely bad things going on in the world.
To worry about in the world.
If if aircraft noise, inverted commas, purring, is the worst thing you've got to do with. Your life is too easy.
And don't jump on a plane.
Exactly. I would also say that they've been talking about this airport for decades.
A very long time.
Right? You knew when you bought your house there, when you moved in, that this could happen.
Yep.
And the other thing I would say before we end this rant is that while there may be some people that we dislike that get offended by that, there will equally be lots of kids that will grow up under the flight path
future generations
that will want to become pilots,
Yep.
will want to become cabin crew.
Yep.
It inspires as many people as it affects.
Absolutely, and the number of jobs this airport is creating in that area is brilliant with the new Aerotropolis. It's brilliant for the area, it's brilliant for the community, and go Western Sydney Airport.
Adam, do I need to make you feel bad again by pointing out that these suburbs of Western Sydney are not in the same socioeconomic bracket as, say, Marrickville?
It'll be fine. Don't worry about that. I think, finally people in the lower socioeconomic bracket get a boost in life. That is the boost of listening to the
Look,
wonderful
I'm excited
side of
because I am now 30-minute drive from either airport.
Great.
Go me.
Fantastic. Okay, welcome back. So we spoke previously there about WSI and the flight paths, but another big-ish story that come out this week is Qantas have kept us up to date with these unclaimed COVID credits. Now, this is a kind of palaver that's been going on for a number of years. So during the pandemic, obviously for no fault of any airlines, obviously a lot of flights got cancelled because of either directly because they had to shut the borders or kind of indirectly that people couldn't get on the plane. And there was all sorts of different rules in terms of whether you got your money back, whether you got a flight credit. And there was a lot of criticism, particularly of Qantas, that they weren't proactive enough in telling people their rights, etc. And Rex, and obviously the caveat here is Rex and Qantas, they don't get on.
No.
But Rex, one of the things they did partly is a goodwill gesture, but obviously sort of is an attack on Qantas, is that they actually set up a system whereby if either your flight got cancelled due to COVID or if you couldn't get on that flight for any COVID-related reason, they would give you your money back. And in fact, I think at one point they worked out so they would put the money back in your bank account within a week, straight back in there. That was an incredibly generous way of doing things. I think every airline should have done that. And that wasn't done by a lot of larger airlines all around the world. But we had a situation where there was hundreds and hundreds of millions of COVID credits that Qantas had mounted up, and they kept pushing back the deadline before they all get wiped out. But they have made progress to Qantas' credit in getting people to redeem them. Jake, tell us a little bit more about what the situation is now.
Yeah, so back in March 2020, the initial figure of COVID credits that were issued for flights that had to be cancelled or postponed or whatever due to COVID was around $2 billion. It's dipping towards $400 million now. So there's been a lot of people who've been using these COVID credits. Of this figure, you've got around $250 million booked direct with Qantas. $150 million through travel agents. Around 80% of these credits, says Qantas, are refundable. 62% of them are worth less than $500. But one thing that Qantas has done is they've also launched an online tool, not to be confused with the 3 online tools in this studio, to help customers find... Hey, I'm including myself in this number, to help customers find their bookings. So apparently can track bookings up to 3 years old that may have changed several times. And Qantas is basically saying, we've extended the deadline for these flights, for these credits is going to be the end of the year. For flights leaving, before 31st of December next year. We have extended this 3 times. We're not going to extend it any further. This is your last chance. Use this online tool to find your credits and claim them before they go away.
There's 2 sides to this story, and I do try to be quite impartial when we talk about it. Now, to Qantas's credit, no pun intended, they have made genuinely a lot of effort to try and help people, to try to alert them to the fact they've got credits. And the argument that there's going to be a cut-off point for this is that they are running a viable business. They cannot just have all this money stacked up. At some point, they need to know what situation they're in. So I do totally understand that. However, on the kind of the flip side, one of the things Qantas said in their kind of media statement this week was, we can't just put all the money back in people's bank accounts because a lot of people's debit cards would have expired by this point, which is correct. However, what they could have done at the time was just automatically put it all back in people's bank accounts, just like Rex did. So there was a precedent for them doing this. What they also make a point of saying, quite rightly, is that the majority of people in the majority of circumstances are actually entitled to a refund rather than credit. And that is because if obviously the airline cancels the flight, then they have to give you your money back. Obviously, that's not the passenger's fault. So the argument is they could actually have done a lot more. Now, again, to sort of criticise Qantas or to criticise, and a lot of airlines did a similar thing, the cost of flying now is considerably higher than it was pre-COVID. So if you are using your flight credit, it's very unlikely you will be able to get an exact like-for-like replacement. Chances are what's going to happen is you will book a similar flight to what you had to before, and then you're going to have to spend a bit more money, which means they're going to make a bit more money out of this.
Absolutely.
What's your view on this here, bringing in Chris?
So look, a couple of things come to mind here. Number one, regarding refunds, there is a particular law that airlines must follow, and the law does state, so this isn't something Qantas is just making up. This is a law that all airlines globally are bound by. A refund must be processed back to the very original form of payment. So if you've used a credit or debit card and that credit card is now expired, the refund must go back to that original card. However, the banks obviously have your new card details. We'll see a refund come back and go, oh, hang on, this card's expired. Let's look into this a bit further. Or this is the new card number. Let's send the money here. So there's a process behind the system. It just takes a little bit longer. But there is an international global law that requires all airlines globally to refund back to the original form of purchase. So if you purchase a ticket through a travel agent and then decide to cancel, the refund must go back to the travel agent. If you go into an airline booking office and pay cash, et cetera, et cetera.
Let's move this away. It is a bit unfair just to pick on Qantas because this
Absolutely.
again happened all around the world. And the airline sort of argument was that if we were to suddenly give all of this money back, we'd be in a world of trouble because, it's COVID, everything was shutting down. We can't just lose all of this money we thought we had. But then the passenger would say, that's not our problem.
Absolutely.
If you've cancelled our flight, we want our money back. We don't want to be on the phone to customer services for hours and hours and hours and then find out there's some very long-winded credit system that they have to navigate. They just want their money back. Jake, what do you think of this here? Because there's different ways of looking at it.
You ever ordered with menu log, Adam?
I do sometimes, actually, yeah.
Have you ever had a problem with menu log?
Oh, many times.
Yeah, and they tried it. You ask them for a refund because your thing hasn't shown up, and they say, well, we'll give you a voucher for the amount of your meal, or the nearest $10 or whatever above that. But the tricky thing is, Adam, this is how they get you. The tricky thing with menu log is when you spend one of their vouchers that they give you, you have to pay. The cost of the meal has to be at least $1 more than the value of the voucher. So what happens is you get your voucher for like $30 for a meal that, I don't know, cost you $27, and you think, gravy, I've got $30. But you have to pay an extra $1. You're giving them more money.
Yep.
The man just wants his pizza, and he wants it now.
I live in an apartment complex, which is actually absolutely a nightmare for people to get into, and for people to find my place. So this happens to me all the time. But relating this back to Qantas, it seems Qantas, and again, in fairness, Qantas has said about 80% of these things can be refunded, and if you want a refund, we can arrange that. So in fairness, they are refunding people now. But if I don't know, this whole flight credits thing, and with some airlines, you can only redeem these flight credits on like crappier seats than you would otherwise have had on worse flights.
So look, where I think number one, no one saw this coming. No one knew how to handle it. There wasn't a rule book for this. We could have learned some lessons from SARS when SARS hit a few years ago. We could have learned some lessons from 9/11 when aircrafts were grounded with 9/11 as well. However, there wasn't a playbook to handle a global pandemic that shut borders globally. What I will say, some airlines handled it better than others. So some airlines had rules where your credit could only be used on the same route that you were originally booked to fly on, in the same cabin class you were originally booked to fly on, with the same passengers you were originally booked to fly with. Some airlines went, you know what, we're just going to make it easy. Here's a credit. You've got, if your original ticket was $2,000, you've got $2,000 to spend with us on any route destination that you like, with anyone that you like. You can gift it to family or friends, whatever. They made it easy for customers to redeem a credit. So kudos to the airlines that made it easy. Sucks to be you to the airlines that made it hard. And unfortunately, the airlines that made it hard are now in this situation where they've still got unused credits going, how are we going to get rid of these credits? And if they take the money from the customer without trying to allow the customer to redeem the credit, then they're only going to get more bad press for it.
I do agree that it was a very difficult situation for airlines. It was also very difficult for the people that were in those call centres or that were at the other end.
I was one of them. I got redeployed to the call centre for 2 years.
This is great.
The front lines.
On the front. We say this every week.
In the trenches, Chris.
In the trenches, getting his hands dirty. Is there no job in the industry you ever done? You were there taking those angry calls. That must have been awful.
Look, it was like, it was tough. And, I was redeployed to a call centre. As we know, I worked for Air New Zealand before joining the Australian aviation team. I was a business development manager, so out on the road looking after travel agents. Obviously, borders shut. We can't see travel agents. I was one of the lucky Air New Zealanders that was redeployed to the call centre, and it was heartbreaking. Some of the calls that I would take, people trying to get home for a loved one is passing. And they need to get home to say farewell, or a loved one has passed and they need to get home for a funeral. And there was nothing I could do because some flights were capacity restricted. Flights into Australia for a short while were capacity restricted. And an Auckland-Sydney flight could operate with only 20 passengers on board. And once it was full with 20 passengers, or once 20 passengers were booked and approved by the Australian government, that was it. No one else could get on that plane.
It's quite a unique situation, I'd imagine, because essentially you're taking the blame, or you're hearing the abuse, or you're hearing the sad stories for something which is not remotely your fault, or that you had no control over at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there were some beautiful people on the phone that were just like, I get it. It's not your fault. I just need to vent. I need to get this off my chest. So not only were we taking calls trying to assist people and help people where we could, we were grief counsellors, we were guidance counsellors, we were just an ear for them to chew.
When people got angry, I bet you gave back as good as you got. When people got horrible, I bet you...
No, it's...
No.
You can't get angry at the situation.
Yep.
And these people were in an unfortunate situation. Look, the way I saw it, they weren't lashing out at Chris, the person. They were lashing out at the system. They were lashing out at the airline. They were lashing out at COVID.
So was this like the cabin crew training as well? Because presumably you had similar situations when you were doing that job that you were listening to on the phone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about empathy and kindness. It goes a very long way, and you have to appreciate each situation is different. Don't get me wrong. There were plenty of calls where as soon as I picked up and said, "Kia ora, welcome to Air New Zealand, this is Chris," they were like, "F this and F that and screw you and screw this." And I was like, if you're going to continue to talk to me that way, I will terminate this call, like right off the bat. So, yes, you had to have a backbone, and yes, you had to kind of stick it where you needed to stick it when you needed to stick it. But at the same time, you needed to appreciate the situation and show a bit of kindness and empathy. No one had a playbook for this. No one knew how this was going to unfold. No one saw this coming. Could you imagine globally airlines all around the world crippled because someone sneezed somewhere?
Okay, welcome back. So one of the stories of the last week is we are, for the first time, starting to see governments, or the Australian government, taking sustainability in aviation a little bit more seriously. Now, the background to this is that Qantas has, to their credit, taken quite a lead on this. And they have, and Alan Joyce, he's obviously got away with words, came out last year, and he said, it's ridiculous that in a country with all the resources Australia have, we are not making a lot of our own sustainable aviation fuel, and we are not a world leader in this. And so, to Qantas' credit, they did take a lead on this. They put their money where their mouth and they invested it, but they made it very clear to governments, we want to see you help a bit more too. We have started to see a little bit more of the federal government actually kind of opening their wallets on this. Jake, tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so the federal government's going to be investing $30 million into developing a local sustainable aviation fuel industry. This is going to be done through ARENA. They're going to be issuing grants along the supply chain to support domestic production of SAF from agricultural feedstocks. Applications are going to be opening from mid next month. This is 2 years after a roadmap from ARENA found that a local bioenergy industry could be worth around $10 billion in GDP and support 26,000 jobs by 2030. Also, what the government has done is establish this National Jet Zero Council, which will be chaired by the Transport and Infrastructure Minister, Catherine King. It's a range of stakeholders from the aviation industry and the fuel supply chain, including one of them is Brisbane Airport CEO, Gert Jandegraaf. Hope I pronounced that correctly. And they're going to be working with the sector to identify opportunities for decarbonisation and collaboration on achieving emissions reduction targets, including through SAF. So, Catherine King has said industry leadership is going to be a fundamental driver of the aviation sector's transition to net zero. So there's going to be members from organizations such as airlines, airports, fuels, manufacturing, research, finance, regional aviation, and defense. So we've got the major airlines, we've got the fuel refiners, we've got the manufacturers, regional aviation, airports, again, defense, government, science, and fundraising agencies. So hopefully this is a sign that we're really starting to take SAF seriously.
One of the interesting things is obviously there's the environmental kind of aspect to it. But surely from the industry point of view, there's a lot of money to be made here. We've got an IATA target for net zero by 2050. The only way you're going to get there is by embracing the sustainable aviation fuel. So this is definitely coming. We know that technology works. You've got all this land going spare in Australia. It makes total sense, as Alan Joyce rightly said, for Australia to be a leader in this.
Absolutely. And I think AusPac, or ANZAC, Australia and New Zealand, are really taking the charge globally in leading this. Power to Qantas, power to Air New Zealand for what they're doing, power to Virgin Australia for what they're doing, power to all
literally power to them.
Yeah, power to them, literally. When we kind of think about it, we're trying to move towards this green carbon neutral future. There is SAF being produced globally offshore. And in order currently for us to bring SAF into Australia, we're having to fly it in or ship it in.
Which is defeating the object in a sense.
Totally defeats the purpose. So there needs to be an onshore solution. There absolutely needs to be. And I think it's a great investment. I'm really, really excited by the direction we're taking in this.
Realistically, we're probably a long way off of having electric aircraft or hydrogen-powered aircraft, being able to fly a long way and being able to fly a lot of people. But SAF can work with the generation of aircraft that Qantas and Virgin are buying in now.
Absolutely, it can.
Well, there have been flights that currently there's like a mandate for blending. There's mandates in a lot of countries for blending traditional aviation fuel with SAF. But I was speaking for the Australian Aviation Podcast today. Watch this space with the CEO of Jet Zero Australia, and he was saying that you can fly a plane. It has been done on 100% SAF.
Yep.
And he was mentioning as well, what with all the especially the agricultural resources that we have, in places like Queensland, where there's just so much sugarcane being grown, turning that into sustainable aviation fuel is essentially a no-brainer because you've got so much agricultural waste, It helps with emissions, not just because it's more energy dense and like lower emissions than regular fuel intrinsically, but also because the production of the SAF through planting all this sugarcane does sequester this carbon. So he says.
Yep.
Well, on that note, time has almost beaten us. I think the key takeaway from this episode, as we transition to a video future, if you have model aircraft, send them in. In fact,
model Sky Kittens.
Model Sky Kittens, yes.
I
send
like
them
puppies
in.
though.
They can be the not so. They don't really purr to puppies.
No, they don't.
But anyway, not just aircraft, but any kind of decent quality merchandise that you could send in. Yeah, we will decorate this. And that's free advertising. So any people in the marketing department, this is your way in there.
Yeah. We will pop it in the studio.
They'll surely get millions of views. So you get it in front of the camera. If you got something, send it in.
Christian from Virgin Australia, if you're listening.
Christian, yes. Christian. Any merchandise you've got, send it in. And we will be back on this show same time next week. Chris, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure as always.
And Jake, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
And I say we will be back same time next week. But for now, for us, goodbye.